It's time's up and we have a quorum and the meeting will begin. And first item of the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. So last meeting was on June 25th. After the meeting, the Secretariat have issued 2 information papers. And the heading has been listed in the agenda, and on the table there is a letter from James Cho submitted to him. I'm looking for the copies at the moment, and I would like to talk a bit on this, and which is related to the Lamma Island collision vessel. On this subject, the Transport and Housing Bureau on the 1st of October 2012 Lamma Island vessel collision incident, on the report of the investigation of the staff misconduct in the Marine Department, and the administration had provided a response this morning. I know that the members hold diverse views on this subject, and since the subject had been discussed on plenty of occasions at this meeting, we have devoted some time in this panel to discuss this. And the Secretariat had repeatedly wrote to the administration to express the members' views. And Mr. Cho would like to discuss this subject on this meeting. However, we have a very packed schedule. I don't plan to have a detailed discussion of this today. After the meeting, the Secretariat will issue a document to consult the members' views on this. Judging for the majority views and opinions, and we'll decide in the next course of action. So what we'll be discussing this today. Next item of the agenda, update on the tendering system for petrol filling station sites, and follow up to the auto fuel study conducted by the Competition Commission. And now can we invite the administration into the room, please? Well, please take a look at the seating arrangement and make sure you're seated correctly, and please press the button if you'd like to speak. So you have to sit according to the seating plan. Okay, we welcome the administration reps and the Competition Commission for taking part in today's meeting. And first we have Mr. Undersecretary for Development, Mr. Chechen Wan, to walk us through the presentation. The Competition Commission and the government had shared a common intention to help to facilitate the competition for auto fuel market. In the past year, we have actually studied the recommendations outlined in the report by the Competition Commission. And while considering the Competition Commission's recommendations, besides in promoting development, we have to take a look into other factors as well. For example, the impact of proposals to the fuel prices, to the environmental and transport impact, as well as on the competing priorities with other tasks at hand, and in the process we keep our communication with the Commission, as well as debating on how to enhance the relevant proposals. And for the relevant and practicable recommendations, we'll try to adopt as much as possible. And for the retendering of the petrol filling station sites to implement this, since the response is quite complicated, I will pass over to my colleague to discuss the measures and the report findings. Good morning, acting chairman members. And last May, the competition announced the report and the study into Hong Kong's auto fuel market. First, to increase the petrol filling stations size, PFS size, Second, review of the tendering system for PFS sites and prominent display of pump prices and walk-in discount. And four, introduction of 95 run petrol. And five, reduction of entry and expansion barriers. Hong Kong is a free economy. Unless there is strong justifications, the government should not try to interfere with the operations of specific sectors and to regulate the pricing as well as the motive operations. And on the fuel market, the government's role is to maintain a stable supply and to maintain an open market and removing barriers to enter the market to enhance competition. We also enhance the transparency of the prices to help consumers making informed choices. The government shares the same vision with the Commission to enhance the competition of the oil fuel market, which may benefit consumers by more and cheaper petrol prices. In considering the Commission's recommendations in the report, the government has taken into account not only competition considerations but only other important factors, including the likely impact of the recommendation on the fuel price, environment, and traffic, as well as the priority between enhancing market competition and other competing needs of the community. And now we shall respond to the Commission's recommendation one by one. The first one would be boosting the supply of BFS sites for tendering as to converting more sites for petrol station. We will increase the supply for stations which you meet and depend on the practical solution. For the larger sites, will be break up into smaller ones to introduce as much competition as possible. And second, now the competition is of the view that the conversion of private lots to gas stations is difficult. The AMB will provide a one-stop service in helping the private land and to convert privately held into PFS use, and the environment will coordinate communications between different departments as well as to coordinate the advice from different departments. The second recommendations that the government should be in touch with stakeholders on the review of the tendering system. We agree with the Commission's recommendations. We've reviewed from time to time and enhanced the tendering arrangements. For example, in 2013, we've introduced the super bid tendering arrangement, and under this arrangement, two new entrants appear in the market, and the three players, their market share from over 90% to drop to around 70%. This demonstrated that this super bid arrangement had effectively promoted competition. In the end, we shall review from time to time the tendering arrangement. We once studied to apply the tendering arrangement on the dedicated LPG station on the petrol filling station. For the 12th DFS, we're taking a zero premium and the fixed price formula, so that to build up a network to encourage taxis and the public green light buses to switch to LPG to improve air quality. So this is a especially environmental policy mandate. However, it does not apply to the petrol stations. The government's policy is to encourage the public to use more public transport and less on private vehicles. If we don't use the established tendering mechanism, it will lead to a drop of the petrol prices, which will indirectly encourage people to own cars and making unnecessary trips. That will lead to deterioration of traffic congestion, which undermine the effectiveness of our roadside emissions measures. And for any new tender arrangement apply to the retender sites, if this retender sites are able to provide lower petrol, they will attract more motorists to use the sites and lead to congestion in the surrounding areas. On the other hand, this arrangement led to criticism of using taxpayers' money to subsidize private vehicles owners. And considering above factors, it is not appropriate to adopt the pricing formula and a zero premium arrangement for PFS. The third recommendation is to suggest that to set up a prominent display for pricing. Wall Street adequately informed of the pump prices and the walk-in discount. We agree that the pricing information board had room for improvement. Therefore, we agree to the Commission's proposal, and for future leases, that we will stipulate that they might have set up a ENB approved price information board. And on the price information, the dimensions and the design and the locations will be specified. And we'll continue to consult the Commission in the process. The fourth recommendation, that the government that while releasing sites into new PFS or while the lease expire, while for retendering, that to stipulate the introduction of 95 RON petrol we have reservations on this recommendation because this proposal might not bring the intended effect of the Commission, may actually have adverse impact. First, on price-wise, for the 95 RON and 98 RON petrol, their wholesale price difference is at about 10 Hong Kong dollars, well, which is made up of less than 1% of the 98 RON petrol price. And since this two different petrol need to be stored in different tanks, and they need to provide both product at once, and the storage tanks and the gas station need to have extra underground storage tanks, improve other facilities such as gas pumps and so on. This would add to the operation cost and capital costs, and actually outweigh the benefits, as well as exceed the small differences between the two types of petrol. So mandating the provision of 95 RON would not bring more choices. We can't rule out that I would like to more expensive petrol than currently we're having. And for the oil product variety, petrol product variety, now that the Hong Kong gas petrol station at 95, 98 standard and 98 premium and diesel, even though we're mandating the provision of 95 RON and some site constraint and cost concerns, some of the oil company may choose to replace one of the 98.3 RON. So the overall product offering may increase on the whole. However, the offering at the petrol station level will not change. And third, on the number of market players, like we said, mandating the supply of 95 RON will make the petrol operators, especially those with less storage facilities at the terminal, to face actual difficulty and incur extra cost. And for alternative fuel car, for example, electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, their development will lead to uncertainty in the long-term demand for the petrol cars. That may affect the response of the upcoming tendering exercise, and there may be less fuel players in the long run in the auto fuel market. The fifth recommendation is that in the long run, the government should explore structural reform options. For example, intervene in the provision of terminal facilities, as well as exploring alternative sources of fuels. Unless there is strong public interest, the government should not regulate the operation of the industry. Like industry, the structural reform options, most of them involve complicated issues and huge costs. The cost incurred may be higher than the benefits they may bring. As for the introduction of a mechanism to allow the operators to open access to third parties, now the storage facilities as a private functions, that would have a complicated legal complication. As for the recommendations of open building oil paths to introduce to import fuel from China, those involve computed costs as well as required land. We have to take the balance to whether which of the more urgent priorities. Based on the above situation, we will not carry out the long-term structural reform options recommended by the Commission. A state information provided to the electrical panel on EDP in March this year. The list of 32 PFS sites will be up for retendering. Based on the present progress, we expect the first batch of these sites will be scheduled for retendering in the first quarter next year. And for the recommendations to consider, probably will implement when we tender these PFS sites. Any other bureau would like to speak? Now we open the floor for questioning.
We have Yik Chi Ming, Elizabeth Quack, Claudia Mo, Albert Ho Chun Yin, Colden Chow, and James Ho. 4 minutes each. First, Mr. Yik Chi Ming. I will try to cover my contents in 4 minutes. Now, in last week's CE response session, I pointed out that the administration misunderstood my proposed formula pricing to imitate the LNG arrangement. Now, I'm not referring to the zero premium arrangement. I will respond point by point. Now, as I said, I never mentioned zero land premium. I explained many times we should follow market price to fix the land premium. Land has a price. The government should recover the land cost. Now, this figure is for the costing purpose. I never said it should be zero. Secondly, you mentioned that due to the zero land premium arrangement, the PFS will the oil price, the fuel price will become much lower. That wouldn't happen because it's not zero land premium. You said that this will encourage more people to own cars. This is wrong because fuel cost is a fairly low proportion of the total auto ownership cost. Now, at least for private cars. Now, parking is a high cost. Now, you say that people will drive unnecessarily. Now, I never hear people doing that because there's traffic congestion. People never drive around for pleasure. Now, so it wouldn't lead to more traffic congestion. Now, you said that this will attract criticism that government subsidizes private car owners with public money. Now, so I never said zero land premium, so there's no issue of subsidy. And you said that there will be problems if you have tendering for individual PFS sites. Now, I said private cars are not the same as taxis. They don't refuel all in a bunch at 4 p.m. And people don't drive to the other PFS just because it's 10 cents cheaper. And I explained to the Commission that you should grasp the opportunity to retender in the same area. Now, you can do it by one area at the same time. So people wouldn't go to a different area just for a 10-cent difference. And in paragraph 15, you said that even if there's a new tendering mechanism, you may not attract new operators. Now, my objective is not to attract new operators. I want to attract real competition. Now, you fix, you should quote the land price. Those who can offer the lowest bid will win. Now, a few. Now, I asked the question in the C&E Q&A session. Now, the Environment Bureau cannot provide the answer by itself. This has to go to the tendering board, etc. Nobody dares to touch it. That's why I raised this issue. I think Mr. Yik was addressing to responses by the administration. I hope that the administration could respond to Mr. Yik's rebuttals. Thank you. Now, in the document, we made it clear that we are responding to the Competition Commission's report. Now, for the LNG stations, it's zero land premium. So we said that that's not appropriate for PFS. We know that Mr. Yik has new ideas. It's not zero land premium. They will still be charging for the land, but you use a formula to control the future auto fuel price. But as the document points out, we think that Hong Kong is a free economy. Unless it's really necessary, the government shouldn't intervene in commercial pricing. Now, for the LNG stations, the government had an objective, that is, through government intervention, there should be cheap LNG for more taxis and minibuses to convert to LNG. But today we are talking about something different. Now, unless we have a new objective, we wouldn't intervene market pricing mechanism. So we think that Mr. Yik's proposal is not appropriate. Next, Elizabeth Quack. Now, the government suffers from schizophrenia. Now, the Competition Commission is under the Economic Development Bureau, and the issue is our auto fuel price is most expensive in the world. And it goes to Environment Bureau. The Bureau says that this is not okay, that is not okay, nothing is accepted, and said that you try to maintain auto fuel price stability and promote competition. What are you doing to promote competition? You don't accept the Commission's proposals. Well, what other proposal do you have to reduce fuel price so that the professional drivers and regular members of the public don't have to suffer the high price? What are you reporting? Way forward, just a couple of sentences. We don't see any ways to resolve the issue. You spend a lot of time on the study, but you are telling us you are doing nothing. Can you tell us, how do you promote competition? How do you lower fuel price? The Undersecretary. I will respond briefly on what we did to promote competition, and my colleagues may have something to add. Now, document mentions that. Now, we want to maintain Hong Kong's the competition among oil companies. Now, we want to maintain transparency in oil price. Now, you don't have to read again from the document. Now, the public is very unhappy, and so is the DAB. We think that you do nothing, you let the public suffer from high fuel price. This is not acceptable. Now, Mr. Xi Jinping says that one should be conscientious and work hard as an official, but you are not doing anything. Now, what Mr. Yik proposes, now, you should let whoever submits the lowest bid operate the PFS. Now, you said, oh, this is different. The LNG station is to serve taxis. But why yes for taxis, but no for private cars? Now, actually, the LNG stations are far from adequate. They have to queue up. They have to wait for a long time, causing traffic congestion. Now, whether it's LNG or PFS stations, they are far from adequate. Mr. Holden Chow will continue in this direction, and the DAB will have a motion. Now, the DAB says that we have done nothing. I think we need to respond. Firstly, I don't know whether you are aware. Now, before 2003, Hong Kong had only 3 oil companies providing fuel products. At that time, 90% of the PFS are controlled by these 3 companies. To increase competition, we introduced the super tender arrangement. Whatever he says, the point is Hong Kong oil fuel price is the most expensive in the world. What you did is useless. The Undersecretary, please respond. Now, we have this super tender arrangement. So the providers have been increased from 3 to 5 in number. Now, there are totally 6 suppliers in Hong Kong now, so competition has been increased. And as for the Commission's proposals, we agree that we will seek to provide more PFS sites. Now, for the large sites, we can consider splitting them up when they are retendered, and we will provide a one-stop arrangement so that oil companies or landowners can receive assistance so that market entrance is easier. So we disagree that the government has done nothing. And the member asks, why is fuel price so expensive? And people also complain that there is rapid increase but slow reduction. But there's no evidence that Hong Kong fuel price suffers from this phenomenon. I'm just repeating what's said in the Commission's report. Now, we face certain issues, but Hong Kong is a free economy. The market is open. Now, I don't want to be a lot of antagonism on this issue. Now, people have different views on what has been done, but people do have the impression that fuel prices rise quickly but fall slowly. Members do have the duty to monitor government's functioning, and they would like lower fuel prices. Now, we previously proposed there can be lower taxes. Now, the members have made suggestions in the past. We hope that the administration could consider them. I will ask when my turn comes. Now, this is not the first time we discuss this, but the Commission's report is out and the government has accepted none of it. So the public is very angry. Claudia Mo, it's very regrettable. I'm also a driver. My impression all along is that Hong Kong auto fuel prices are raised very quickly but reduced very slowly, say, compared to the U.S. Of course, individual PFS offer their own discounts. Now, you say it's a free market. The government tries to do the minimum. In that case, you don't even need a competition commission. Now, the capital will be paramount. Now, even Adam Smith doesn't say that. He said that there should be some adjustment to market power. Now, at the SPCA nearby, there is a petrol filling station. Now, you can see every day, just before 4 p.m., there's a long queue. The queue reaches as far as the police officers' club. They say they have to wait half an hour to 45 minutes just because they want to save a few dimes. Now, for private cars, of course, they don't queue up for half an hour just for a few dimes. Now, you say that the LNG arrangement is not suitable for PFS because when there is retendering, and if the oil prices fall, then there will be more drivers and there will be more congestion nearby. I don't think this makes sense. And you said that traffic congestion causes lower roadside air quality. So cheaper oil works against air quality. Now, this is very twisted argument in my impression. Now, you said that the larger PFS sites should be split into smaller ones to introduce competition. Can you quantify that? How many sites do you have in mind? Will you multiply by 2 or multiply by 3? How are they distributed? The Undersecretary?
From now to 2025, there's about 20 PFS sites would have lease expiring. For the 50 sites, about 20 of those are of a bigger size. And now for the town planning, they have a minimum requirement on this size. For this, so the standard will be those who are at least 1 times bigger than the existing standards. So 20 of those that could be to break into 2 that able to fulfill the minimum planning standards. There's 20 lots. Of the 20 lots on safety and traffic issues, about 3 of those can be carefully studied. In the future, we'll explore the way that these sites can be broken up. In terms of safety and the impact of surrounding environments, do you have a time frame that when you can announce the details? Since they will expire in a few years' time, so we will have time to prepare. Mr. Ho Chun-yin, thank you, Chairman. Upon hearing your response, I'm quite baffled. So on the breaking up of the PFS sites to promote competition, so you have more competition, the oil prices will drop. So if you it's forming a cycle. So the EDB is the zenith bureau ever. So have you done anything? You want to promote competition today, and your report spent a year and only to tell us that you're not doing anything. So only come up with a new tender arrangement. Now we are examining your finding as well as your feasibility of future proposals. So what you propose, I don't see they're able to bring the fuel prices to public affordability. That is intuitively felt by the public. It's like you said, and the fuel prices is not have rocks and feather approach. Maybe you didn't look at this detail. And for the water transport stakeholders, we always feel the water petrol station have not enough of them, and there's no petrol fare. Every time we go to Sai Kung, a lot of stakeholders have told us that we need to take a taxi to bring the buckets to the nearby gas station to bring the carriage out. Every time we could only fill up 2 buckets. However, for each trip you will use more of them, so we have to make dozens of trips. would add to the traffic congestion and wasting petrol. That is that product of ED policy. So two questions. So just Elizabeth Quad and other members. So what you meant as in for the retender arrangement, like you said, breaking up the 3 sites. Well, the 3 sites probably not enough for the entire territory. Do you have the aim of lowering fuel prices? As for the refilling at sea, how do you resolve that? Because the diesel sold in the gas station provided by the oil companies, have you ever looked at where their prices have so down for evenly? Have the government have considered to cutting the taxes to reduce the fuel prices? And the Secretary. Today we're talking about competition. That's why how do we maintain the competitiveness in the fuel prices? To lower the fuel prices probably is not the aim of proposed measures. So we're going to have an aim to lower the fuel prices through this measure we propose. If the competitiveness can be enhanced, the fuel prices will be maintained at a reasonable level or able to reduce to lower levels through competition. However, lower fuel price is probably not the focus of discussion. I still have some time. Can the EDB tell us, do you think today's fuel prices is reasonable or not? And the Secretary, I believe that whether it is reasonable or not, we should have the public to decide. You have competition to have the fuel price at reasonable levels. Now the public feel that the fuel price are at reasonable levels to promote. So can this two measure proposal able to effectively control fuel prices? Today is a focus as to how to maintain a price competition, and the future directions will have summarized what we said earlier. In the future, and while up for retendering, the aforesaid proposal will be implemented. So therefore, we will implement the measures we mentioned. For example, that we can able to push out more PFS site and how to convert private lots into petrol stations, and by having prompt display upon prices market discount to let the public get informed choices so that they could refill with lower price petrol. So these are the conditions will be incorporated for the retender exercises. Next, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. The rocks and feather approach of fuel prices, as well as the public perception of collusion, is well demonstrated, and have contacted the Competition Commission myself. As for the, it's very difficult to prove legally of the collusion of oil companies. What I don't want to see is that because it's hard to substantiate, therefore nothing need to be done. Today's issue is that the competition had offered the recommendations that could be acted on, but I don't understand why you're not willing to take on board. First, that on the reintroduction of the 95 RON petrol, having one more option would able to introduce more competition, of course, and the response that the price difference will be insignificant. And once you have the new product, and they will need to have more storage tanks, and actually may drive up their prices at the end. So allow me to question this. So when this was introduced many years ago, and how did they all came about? So do they have a way to deal with this new product? And for the tendering, the Competition Commission had mentioned that you can able to encourage new entrants to join, that we're likely to have more competition. However, in your document you mentioned that in the past that you have a price-based arrangement. If all of a sudden there's a new entrant to the market, well, they might incur significant investment or are able to provide the 95 round petrol. So does that make you shut the door on him and not willing to join the market? Well, it's all a matter of will. You know what the problem is if you allow the more new entrants. So if the market is being monopolized, you have to think of ways to letting new entrants in. So can your tendering system be changed accordingly? So I will have an ad hoc motion to be moved later, hoping to tackle this. I'll like to hear from administration first. Under Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. And for the introduction of 95 round petrol, we have studied this recommendation carefully. As for why at the end we decided against mandating it, and like the members have mentioned, if at this time we mandate the oil companies to introduce them, and for the upstream, let's say for the oil tanks, and they have to vacate the entire ones, they can't just vacate half of it, devote the whole oil storage tank to store this RON 95, and the whole supply chain will have to make accommodations, and to the petrol station they would have to be retrofitted to add more oil tanks. And looking at the current situation, so our oil mostly imported from Singapore. For the 95 RON and 95 RON, their offshore prices, their wholesale prices only like 10 cents difference. So for all the troubles to introduce a product that's only 10 cents cheaper, the overall petrol prices, and because of this, will actually be raised instead of reduced, which may not be offering benefit on the whole. If we stipulate in the introduction of 95 RON, they will need to devote one whole tank to store this 95 RON. Also due to retrofitting conversion at the oil station, some of the smaller oil stations, they may be unfavorable. So now that the mandating requirement will reduce the competition. So taking into account all these factors, at this stage, to mandate the introduction of 95 RON might not be beneficial. So is there any way to promote more competition, since we don't want to mandate the introduction of 95 RON? And due to the shortage of land, the government can identify for a new sites. However, we may not take as a high priority. If some of the private investors would like some of their land to become PFS sites, the procedures used to be very complicated in the past. So we can provide a one-stop service so that the prospective investors, so we can facilitate their application so that they can enter the market easier. As for the potential large oil companies who are interested in entering the Hong Kong market, for the super bid tender arrangement is to help the bigger operators. Through the super bid arrangement, they can at one go win the tender of multiple sites instead of winning the tender one by one. So looking at history, and due to this arrangement, those who offer oil products have increased from 3 to 5. So we think that this arrangement will be of help.
Now, the mother companies of the oil companies now operating in Hong Kong, they are very sizable transnational oil companies. Now, Mr. Albert Ho Chun Yin has to go to another meeting, and he asked me to declare that he is a member of the Competition Commission. Next, James To. I do drive, so I declare the interest. I hope the government can understand, having heard from the members, now, you are responding to the Commission's report, but when the members hear your response and your proposed solutions, they will be very disappointed. Now, I don't know whether the government understands. In the minds of many members of the public, there is no reasonable competition. They feel that there is price collusion. The system is such that the oil companies are able to collude in pricing or to reduce competition. Now, that's the view of most members of the public. Now, as a member of LegCo, I've heard your explanations for many years. You are unable to convince me otherwise. The problem is that the oil companies all along are trying to win the game against you. Now, people had high hopes in the Commission's report, but you say you won't do this, you won't do that, you would do just a few small things. Why is it that you previously wouldn't break up the PFS sites? So you are really reluctant. Now, I'm not saying that the Competition Commission is all wise, but it shows that the Carrie Lam administration is totally incompetent in its contest with the oil companies. It cannot reduce fuel price through reasonable competition. The Undersecretary cannot provide a good explanation. The Carrie Lam administration is incompetent. It's useless. So I hope you understand. Your answer today now is even rejected by the pro-establishment camp members, because there's real grievance by members of the public. Now the Commission has tried to find ways out by whatever means they can. Now, if you give it a try, at least the members of the public will say you have spent the effort to try. I think that the public will trust the Commission more than they trust you. The government is losing against the oil companies. We thank the member for his comments. Now, I understand the views of the public. As the government, we need to be careful in studying the problem. And in our proposals, we will try to find new ways to increase competition in the automobile sector. We will continue to work on that. Now, on competition, now many people look at the retail price to see if the prices differ or not. Actually, the retail price includes several components apart from the product cost. Now, because the products sold are very similar, so the product cost doesn't vary a great deal. Then there's the land price and there's tax. So the oil companies pay similar land costs and taxes. And then there are the discounts. Now usually when you go to a PFS, the price paid is not the retail price. Some PFS offer a discount of $1, some more than $2. So the prices do differ among the oil companies. They are not entirely consistent. And also, the number of oil companies in Hong Kong is not low compared with neighboring jurisdictions. We have 6. Tokyo, they have only 6. Singapore, 4. Taipei, 2. So if you regard the number of oil companies, Hong Kong is not low. And the Competition Commission did suggest that we increase the number of PFS sites, but we know that land is scarce in Hong Kong. We are trying to find land for residential use. So that's why we have reservations on that proposal. Now, some PFS sites are downstairs of residential buildings, and the Undersecretary also said that whether a site is suitable for PFS depends on whether the site can meet the various requirements, such as access by vehicles. Now, so if the site is of the right size and it meets other requirements, it should be feasible. Next, Dennis Kwok. Now, I declare that I'm a member of the Competition Commission. Now, having read the report, the government doesn't accept a main point, that is the long-term structural reform as proposed by the Commission. Now, the document doesn't even want to study in detail the proposed long-term fundamental reforms. Now, are these reforms feasible? You have to study before you can make a conclusion. You have to study before deciding that they are not feasible. Now, members pointed out that you wouldn't look into it. You wouldn't study how to attract new competition or to make reforms. You just try to make small amends. Now, the Commission proposes in-depth reforms. If you don't even study them, you cannot convince this Council and the public that you have done all you can. Shouldn't you study these in-depth reforms, the Undersecretary? We thank the member for his comments. Now, we have already studied the Commission's report for 1 year. We try to look into the implementation, and we find that there are many reasons why the proposals are not suitable for implementation at this point. Now, on fundamental reforms or structural reforms, one of the more important proposals is that new terminals be made available for oil companies. Now, if we are going to build new terminals, we need extra land and a huge cost. Now, as mentioned, now, do we have enough oil companies? Now, compared to neighboring cities, our number is not low. Do we need to use a lot of land to build a new terminal? Now, there's an alternative. Now, the current operators have some terminal facilities. Can they be shared? Now, we did consider that. Now, the current terminal facilities are their private property. Their lease goes to 2040 something. Now, if we are to get the use of their terminal facilities, we have to obtain their approval. There must be agreement on both sides. There are complicated legal issues that must be carefully considered. Now, the Commission hopes you can study long-term solutions, but your grounds are insufficient. I hope you will study again the Commission's report. Next, Shiu Ka Fai. I'd like to ask the administration, how much is spent each year on petrol and diesel? Do you know? We don't have the information. If necessary, we can try to look that up. Please provide that later. The Deputy Secretary, Mr. Lau, said that the number of oil companies in Hong Kong is not low, it's 6 now, but you say it's similar. Japan also has 6, but how much lower is their price compared to Hong Kong's? We can't compare with other jurisdictions because their market structure is different. Now, Hong Kong petrol is entirely imported. We don't have our own refinery facilities. Now, we have high land costs and there is tax, so we can't compare directly with other jurisdictions. So you are saying that Japan has refineries. Now, are there other jurisdictions that don't have oil refineries? Have you compared the prices with those jurisdictions? We don't have the information at this moment. We don't think it's appropriate to make direct comparison with Japan. If we don't compare with other jurisdictions, then how do we compare? Now, all the parties are very angry on this. Now, we've talked about this petrol price issue a long time. Now, why did people support the legislation on the competition? Now, it's because of the oil companies. Now, but after all these years, nothing is done. You say there is no land. You say you don't have enough land for the oil tank storage areas or the PFS. It's the storage area. So Hong Kong people have to suffer high petrol price. Is that fair? The government seems powerless. The public is very conscious of this. Of course, we compare with other jurisdictions. Of course, some countries are oil producers, some countries have cheaper land, but you have to convince Hong Kong people. Singapore is not large in area. Is Singapore petrol price lower or higher compared to Hong Kong? My colleague already explained why we cannot directly compare with other jurisdictions on production, transport, and taxes. We all differ. Now, 70 or 80% of our oil is from Singapore. RON 98 petrol is about $16 a liter. Now, Singapore is about $15, so it's about $1 difference. Hong Kong's petrol is from Singapore refineries. It has to be shipped there. So there are various factors. So nothing can be done?
Mr. Lok Chung Hong, besides RON 95 or 98 RON, so there had been some market research that there could be 10% in savings, and now your study concluded only led to 1% reduction in retail prices. I understand. So how did your study arrive at a 1% difference? Can you provide us more figures to back it up? I know that a lot of the oil products in Hong Kong are from Singapore, or even for the same refinery. So why didn't the Hong Kong oil companies do global procurement on sourcing? Have you looked into the reason why? So it's not only Singapore had refineries, China and Taiwan and so on. All the countries had refineries as well. Undersecretary. So Members is ranked at refinery in a lot of countries. And looking at Hong Kong history, not all the oil come from Singapore. In the past, it used to be sourced from Korea and Japan. And still, as some of the oil are sourced from Korea. At the end, where do the oil companies buy the oil if their price issue? Maybe because Singapore is closer, there may be lower transport costs. Well, there are other commercial reasons to let the oil companies decide where to buy the oil. So if you claim it distance-wise, it would be any closer than the mainland or Taiwan. So why couldn't we buy more oil from them? Or Japan? Well, Japan is closer than Korea. Have you studied the reasons? Is it because they're more expensive? Or is some kind of secret agreement? Therefore, they only buy from one or two refinery. Is that what really happened? Like I said, there are a lot of business consideration, other factors. I'll defer from the colleague to explain. Vincent. To decide where to source their oil, that would be business consideration of the oil companies. So Singapore is one of the major oil trading hub. So for the oil company, if you buy there, that's understandable. Besides Singapore, we have Korea and Japan. For diesel, they're also mainland imports. So as to where to buy the oil companies will have the price in mind when deciding. Are you definitely sure it's just pure price consideration without considering other interests or like vertical integration? Shouldn't be any provisions stipulating that for the oil retailers must have a transparent global procurement policy? Otherwise, you can't dispel the public suspicion that it have some sort of relationship with certain refinery and purely not based on price consideration. So that will lead to insufficient competition and so that the oil prices don't come down. I hope that you can look further into that. Thank you for your suggestion. We'll look into whether we can find more information on that. I had a few questions myself. Of course, the oil companies are free to decide where to buy the oil, whether Japan or Singapore. Well, in the past, I raised that myself, that there was a tax on the fuel here, just like the UK, pretty high here, which made our retail fuel prices so high. Of course, the public vehicles are exempt, and so is diesel. So based on what consideration, when you replied that the tax cannot be reduced, so nowadays, based on what reasons can we not have review on the tax? If we cut the tax, I'm sure that the fuel prices will reduce considerably. How does that mean that having a cheaper fuel will encourage more cars on the road, will lead to more congestion? But can you reconsider, since they will affect all motorists? Under Secretary. Thanks for Chairman's question. On the issue of tax, I think it's quite complex. On the fuel tax, we take into other factors, for example, tax receipts, environmental protection, transport, as well as the views of the others, all stakeholders. So what you propose, I cannot answer how the government will so this is a very complicated issue. So I'm raising this again and hoping the administration to give us a response. In the past, we have a certain provisions inherited from the colonial days, so just whatever is adopted in the UK, we just followed. But now that it's been 21 years since the reunification, though the UK kept with such practices, but shouldn't Hong Kong revisit these legislations, or consider if it worthy for amending? So I hope the Bureau can examine that. For second round, we have one member, Frankie Yek, and no other members would like to speak. So I will draw the line here. Frankie Yek. So just now the Undersecretary replied to the competition report, and therefore they have mentioned that the land had a value. So I mentioned this multiple times. I mentioned in the past that I've discussed it with the Consumer Council and the Competition Commission. Both bodies think it could be considered. The Competition Commission's report, I'm urging you to review the mechanism, and in future there will be a lot of the PFS sites that have up for retender, so they'll provide an opportunity for you to reconsider in changing the arrangement. So that is my understanding of what is set out in the Commission's report. I hope that I didn't get it wrong. So what we said have one aim that will help to provide reasonably priced fuel for the public and fair to them. So I said many times that the fuel prices in Hong Kong are highly consistent. For different oil companies, different locations, they still have the same price. In other countries, each petrol station have different price. Have you looked into the reasons? Let's say there's a lot in Causeway Bay, while the land was worth a lot, awarded the highest bidder. However, for Sun Tin, it seems to share the same prices. So, seems the motorists at Suntin is subsidizing the motorists in Subway Bay. So the Competition Commission claims that there's no such thing as the rocks and feather phenomenon, and the Consumer Council have confirmed this twice, and the study done by Labour Party confirmed this, that it's delayed by 4 days. We have numbers to back it up. Well, yet you disagree. I've all along suggested hope the government could do something to bring fair competition to the public. So in the market, we have the rocks and feather phenomenon and highly consistent prices. You hope to introduce other providers, because doesn't do anything. So no matter how many new players in the market, they still have the more or less the same price for RON 95 or RON 98. I don't think the price difference is that little. Well, I think there's a shortage of underground storage tanks. Is their major challenge. I'm very disappointed to this report, and my other members have shared a similar sentiment. I hope that the Bureau can seriously do something for the Hong Kong public. I told Carol Lam the other day, and she replied that the Secretary can capable of handling that. That's what I want to say. And the Secretary. Thanks for the members' advice, and we'll understand their views. We'll continue to look into ways that through our tendering to enhance competition in the fuel prices. Today we have a motion moved by Mr. Holden Chow, seconded by Dr. Elizabeth Quat, which has been tabled to you. So let's give 1 minute to Mr. Holden Chow to read out his motion. I'll just ring the bell to bring the members in for voting. Thank you, Chairman. I'll just read out the motion wordings. I believe that we can reach consensus on this. This panel urged the administration to proactively add the number of petrol filling stations in Hong Kong to review the tendering mechanism for existing PFS sites and to examine the reintroduction of 95 RON oil products and to study a feasible ways to provide storage facility and terminal for new operators to import fuel, as well as to explore other sources of fuel to mitigate the high market concentration of the vehicle fuel market, to further promote competition, lower the prices to benefit the consumers. That's it. Today we shall vote by the pressing of a button. So please return to your assigned seat.
Today's motion is by Mr. Holden Chow. The photocopy is tabled before you. Does any member wish to declare interest? Several have declared already. Well, if you consume fuel, you don't have to declare that. Unless you consume illicit fuel. Please press the button to vote. You have voted, so voting stops. The results are displayed. 14 for, no objection. The motion is carried. We thank the Environment Bureau and the Competition Commission for attending this meeting. Next item of agenda, creation of a supernumerary post of Senior Principal Executive Officer in the Tourism Commission to assist in establishment of the Travel Industry Authority. I declare my interest. I am a shareholder in a travel agency. I'm a assistant managing director of a travel agency, and I'm also honorary chairman of an association. We welcome the colleagues from the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau. Now, today we are proposing to create the post of a Senior Principal Executive Officer for a period of 24 months to assist in the establishment of the Travel Industry Authority and to responsible for transitional arrangements. Over the years, the government has worked with LegCo, including this panel and other stakeholders, to work towards establishing the TIA to regulate travel agents, tour guides and escorts, and to promote the long-term development of the industry. Last January, with the support of the Council, we submitted with the relevant travel agency ordinance bill, and we have tabled that for scrutiny by members, and after in-depth discussion, the Bills Committee in July this year has basically completed clause-by-clause scrutiny, and after the summer break, the bill will be we will deal with the proposed committee stage amendments, and by the end of the year, we hope that the TIA can the establishment can proceed further. Now, the transition from the old system to the new arrangement will involve a lot of work, and we will set up this group to a preparation team under the Tourism Commission, and the TIA will need about 2 years to complete the arrangements, and it will take over the licensing and regulating functions from the travel agency registry and from the Travel Industry Council, and we will be happy to hear members' views. First, UC Wing. Now, clause-by-clause scrutiny has been completed. There will be some amendments. We hope that after the LegCo resumes in October, we can complete second and third reading. Now, the industry also wishes that the TIA can be established at an early date. The process is quite complicated. We need an experienced executive officer, but I think administrative experience is not enough. Now, he should have knowledge about the tourism trade. Otherwise, he will need to be familiarized with the trade, and that will take time. So, will you require tourism-related experience for this post? And out of the 8 non-directorate staff, now, is there any one with legal background? Because that experience will be needed for the work of the TIA. Now, on the second half of your question, on the 8 non-directorate staff, why is there no lawyer? Now, subsidiary legislation by the government, now that will be drafted by the Department of Justice. Now, the subsidiary legislation made by the TIA will be the responsibility of its internal lawyers, but we are in the preparation stage, so we will not require that yet at this point. So from preparation to the appointment of the staff by TIA, how long will that take? Now, you will require the chief executive officer, the chairperson, members of the board. So how long will that take? Now, and how much longer will it take for the TIA to be operative with a full establishment? Would 2 years be enough? If not, will its work be followed up by other units like the Tourism Commission? Now, concerning the senior principal executive officer post, we expect that it can be functioning as early 2019. The whole process will take about 2 years for the regulatory authority to be established, judging from the experience of other regulatory bodies. Now, if the work cannot be completed within 2 years, we may need to extend the period for this supernumerary post. Can you provide a supplementary document on the timeline? Because there will be handover arrangements from the Tourism Industry Council. There are several dozen staff there. Now, if you don't make proper arrangement, it may affect morale. Now, if this proposal is endorsed by LegCo, you should provide a timetable on the work of this officer, and the existing staff will be able to follow that timetable, and the future guidelines, etc., have to be drawn up. Now, simply speaking, first the legislation has to pass, and as we said in the Bills Committee, now the supplementary legislation has to be commenced. That will take about 2 months. Now, after the provisions empowering the Commission have come into effect, we can appoint the chairperson and so on. And there will be transitional arrangements to support the TIA and chairperson and board members before the full establishment have come into their jobs. So we will provide a timetable. When can you provide the timetable? Well, we will provide that as soon as possible. Next, Mr. Luk Chung Hong. Now, I am not that confident that the legislation will pass. Now, the TIA, of course, will have its functions and benefits. Now, the trade unions have expressed many concerns. Now, there's little safeguards offered to the labor sector. So we are not sure we would support it. The government should not be confident that this bill will pass. We will certainly propose amendments. Now, if the bill doesn't pass, then will the post not materialize? There wouldn't be such a post. Would the money be used for other purposes? We
understand the members and those in the trade unions that will hope that the new regulation would strengthen to protect the frontline staff. So we've put in a lot of safeguards for our frontline workers to protect the tourist guides and a tour escort, that the TIA Tourism Industry Authority, through administrative measures, to stipulate that the travel agents and guides and the escort must enter agreement, which will lead to the effect that first we have to pay the remunerating the guide and escort, which currently some of the unscrupulous products, for example, kickbacks. We hope that this will cease, so that we provide remuneration. And second, they cannot require the tourist guides and escort to pay in advance in receiving tour groups, and also cannot delay in reimbursing the tourist guides and escort. If they violated such administrative measures, the TIA will always sanction or take disciplinary action. So this is an effective gesture to ensure that our frontline practitioners will have for protection. As for the employment relations or the insurance, for employment relations, we understand that the sector hold very diverse views and fail to yet a consensus at this stage. Therefore, we will carefully consider Mr. Lok's suggestion. And in my opening speech, I mentioned that after the Summer Recess, the Bills Committee will deal with the committee stage amendment, and by then we will explain by then. And for the purchase of insurance, and I communicated with Mr. Lok earlier, we hope that we can take a form of administrative measures to strongly encourage our travel agents to ensure the tourist guides and escorts. And so whether they are a self-employed or an employee, is a purely commercial arrangement, and we cannot dictate them what to do. As for the self-employed, there are suitable products, insurance products for them. So we'll enhance communication so that for the employers and the frontline workers and can reach a consensus in that. As I'll let the Assistant Commissioner to supplement. Thanks for Mr. Lok's question. And for this post, the government will try to have the bill passed if the exceptional circumstances and to eliminate the need for the post. We have established practice. We'll review the need for it or whether we have new duties for this post. Any other members would like to speak? Mr. Yu Shi-wing. Second round. So just now the Undersecretary replied that for 8 of those that were without legal background, because they have assistance from the Department of Justice. So if we have to consult the DOJ on everything, they probably don't. They only can help whenever they're free. And some of them probably cannot be asked to consult the secretary directly. For the 8 members, at least you can have someone with a legal background or legal knowledge. So while drafting the subsidiary legislation, their views can be consulted. So we hope to be quick instead of just going back and forth for answers. And for the licensing, future licensing arrangements on the tour agent license as well as the tour guide license, I think those who have experience can be considered. You mentioned the offering support. Whether you are recruiting or offering advice, you have to be a professional. If you don't have any knowledge in the sector, how can you be in a position to offer advice? So I hope that you can consider. And for the recruitment of the person, for the 8 person, would some of them can be moved to the TIA so that there will be a successful handover, so that they would stay on. So can some of them can be transferred to TIA? And for the experience of this SPEO, the Secretary have answered directly that do we need to possess a relevant experience, or whether you would consider a candidate would have some exposure to tourism sector, for example, the Tourism Commission or the Travel Industry Registry. So or you just simply consider all candidates? So for the personnel arrangement, I wonder if the Secretary would consider this suggestion. As for the selection criteria for the executive director, like other statutory bodies, there will be an open, transparent recruitment to identify those who are trustworthy and strong management competence. And I'm not asking for the executive director, but rather the position in discussion, the senior principal executive officer. Let me answer the second question first. So for the preparation stage, and the government will be drafting the subsidiary legislation. If it's done by the government, this DOJ will help on this. As for the TIA, for its preparation, probably not much can be done for TIA at this point. I got this already. So afterwards, they will hire the internal counsel to deal with this. Now they will have to draft the subsidiary legislation that require professional input. So they need to have some tourism background, necessarily a lawyer. So you're hiring anyway. It's nice to have someone in-house that would able to tackle a lot of issues. I'll let the Assistant Commissioner to supplement. On this SPEO, so there will be appointed a senior police servant. So I expect to be a general skilled position. Of course, we noted Mr. Yu's suggestions. Will hopefully, for the relevant grades, we try to have those with some experience. Well, with tourism experience is better, but at least they will have some licensing experience in other sectors. If we deal with similar licensing mechanisms in the past, that could be familiar with the relevant provisions, like the Undersecretary said. So this preparation team will definitely get the support of DOJ. So they will have some concrete legal support in this regard. As for the weather, and they will be at when the TIA already have its own own team, they only have the in-house counsel. So by then, there will be even more legal support. As for like I said, so can some of the members of the preparatory team, the non-directorate officers, can stay on to the TIA. We don't rule out for other regulatory agencies. We have some secondment arrangements in the past, so it depends on the actual need. But at this stage, that will stay with the Tourism Commission, especially for the early stage of the preparation, as it go on full swing. That whether it will be seconded to TIA, so that it will work under TIA so that there will be smoother operations that we consider. Hope that we can learn in the past, let's say for the SFC and the Insurance Authority. And of course the TIA is unique in a sense. So I think it's a good start. I hope that for the formation of TIA, that you can accelerate and assure this quality, so that they would enhance the development of the tourism sector. No, any other questions? So that we all support this establishment proposal. So this concludes this item. Next, any other business? I don't have any other business, members. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members and the administration representatives to attend the last panel meeting of this legislative session. So I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.